And a few accidents out there still need to let you know about. I-77 northbound at Fort Jackson Boulevard. Also Bush River Road near Lake Murray Boulevard, kind of there at Coldstream. I-20 westbound at exit 80, and that'd be Clemson Road. And then I-20 westbound at Highway 378, that's exit 61. I-77 northbound at Garner's Ferry Road. We do have an accident there. And one other to remind you about, and that's Spears Creek Church Road at Wood Creek Farms Road. 82 for the high today. Some rain coming in around lunchtime. Maybe a couple thunderstorms popping up this afternoon and this evening as well. Tomorrow and Wednesday, cloudy and highs around 90 or 91. But right now it's kind of breezy, cloudy, and it is 71 on the early game.
Nine o'clock on your Monday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point here on the game. Tyler Head along with you, back in where I usually am. Took a couple days off. Appreciate Elijah, Terry, whoever filled in on Thursday and Friday while I was gone. I checked out of everything for a couple days to clear the mind a little bit. Got to hang out with the wife. Went to the beach, actually. It was very nice down there in the Isle of Palm, Charleston area. So certainly enjoyed that. I got some sunshine. Didn't get burnt. Thankfully, I do burn pretty easily, so thankfully didn't get too crispy this time. But good to get away and enjoy some time away from what can be a very, very chaotic sports calendar, which is certainly what we're dealing with right now. I do want to bring this up. I didn't get a chance to talk about this with Preston a little bit earlier on the early game. I encountered some old school candy that I didn't think existed anymore. If you're following me on Twitter at TylerHead18, you may have already seen this, but I went into a gift shop down there in Isle of Palms, and they had like the candy stuff at the counter, like right as soon as you walk in, and my eyes directly darted to the candy cigarettes and bubblegum cigars that were sitting in front of the checkout counter. I didn't think they made those anymore. And from some of you that responded to me on Twitter, apparently you can buy them at certain general stores and stuff like that. But I was surely convinced that both candy cigarettes and bubblegum cigars had been outlawed at this point in time because, hey, smoking's bad. I get it. Like, you don't want to promote that kind of stuff, especially not to kids. So I was pleasantly surprised to find those old school treats that I probably haven't had in close to 20 years at that gift shop the other day. So that was pretty neat. And again, just need to be able to get away for a couple days. But back in, locked in, enjoyed a lot of sports over the weekend, took in plenty of baseball, which I'll get into in just a moment, but was also pleasantly pleased to hear that Gamecock basketball, kind of wrapped up their transfer portal recruiting with another very, very solid get in Jamari Thomas from Norfolk State. Now, Lamont Paris set the bar pretty high this past year when it came to the transfer portal and what the production out of the portal was by the guys that came in. Now, there was, I don't want to say unknowns, but there was questions on how guys like BJ Mack, how guys like Stephen Clark, how they were going to translate to playing at the SEC level, given the fact that they had never done it before. Now, Stephen Clark ended up getting phased out of the starting lineup about halfway through the season as CMB came along, but BJ Mack obviously ended up being one of the best players on this entire team and was one of the big reasons why this team went as far as they did. And you also brought in, obviously, Talon Cooper, Miles Studi, guys that had played basketball, either a lot of basketball or played at the SEC level so far. So not as many questions about them. But the transfer class as a whole panned out so well for South Carolina. And Lamont Paris in general has had such a good track record with the transfer portal over his first couple of seasons at South Carolina. Michi Johnson came in as a transfer 2 years ago from Ohio State. And obviously we were anticipating him being back for 24 and 25. That's obviously not happening. So Lamont Paris had the task of going out there and addressing several needs in the transfer portal. Because you are losing Mack, you are losing Talon Cooper. You've now lost, Amici Johnson transferring back to Ohio State. So how is it going to go out there and address these needs? And you've already added in Nick Pringle. You've already added in Jordan Butler, two guys that have played in the SEC. Nick Pringle, a very good contributor at Alabama. Jordan Butler, somebody that was on a bad team and getting a chance to shine as much as people hoped he would have. And then you go out and you add Jamari Thomas over the weekend. 6 foot, 185 pound, from just up the road in Greensboro. Has played a lot of college basketball in his career between 2 years at UNC Wilmington and now this past season in Norfolk State. And when you look at his numbers, very, very solid. Now, he emerged quite a bit this past year in his time at Norfolk State, MEAC Player of the Year, and, averaging just under 17 points a game. Good when it comes to assists, 3.8 a game on average. Also averaged 3.8 rebounds. This is a guy that's not afraid to play defense. So good on both sides of the ball, and that's something that I think's kind of a mark of what a Lamont Paris-esque basketball player is going to be. Is yes, you want guys that are obviously great at shooting the ball, and Jamari Thomas is that. 40% on his field goals, 38% from three this past season, but also really good at playing defense. Out of those 3.8 rebounds that he gets a game, 3.1 of them are defensive rebounds. So somebody that's not afraid to be physical near the basket, jump up and grab those rebounds. And for somebody that's 6 foot to be able to do that, that says a lot about his defensive ability, which again, South Carolina, slow-paced team, limited possessions, defense matters a lot to Lamont Paris. And Jamari Thomas being built as a smart guy, somebody that can do a lot of different things on the court, including playing defense. Very excited to see what he's going to do in a Gamecock uniform. And again, this pretty much puts a bow on the transfer cycle for Lamont Paris and South Carolina basketball this offseason. And again, 3 very quality gets that should keep South Carolina basketball at a very, very high level for this upcoming season, where making the tournament's going to be the bare minimum. That was a lofty expectation this past year because nobody knew what the team was going to be. A lot of us were very down on them. Maybe not to the point of picking them last in the SEC, but a lot of us weren't expecting a ton out of the team, and they went out there and exceeded all of our expectations by making it their first dance since 2017. And again, now that's going to be the floor. That's the minimum. You're expected to be in the tournament this year. Can you win in the tournament? Can you get to that second round? Can you get to the Sweet 16, wherever it may be? Tournament is the bare minimum this year. And again, when you bring in the talent that you have from the transfer portal, in addition to CMB coming back for another year, Jacoby Wright, possibly sliding into one of those starting roles, not to mention the high caliber talent that you're bringing in with guys like Cam Scott in your freshman class. Plenty of reason to be excited on what South Carolina basketball is going to be for the 2024 season. That's a ways off before we tip off in late November. What we're living in right now is baseball season, and South Carolina baseball is doing plenty of exciting things themselves, with another crucial series victory over Missouri this past weekend out there on the road in Como. And in fact, Ed Bird is producing for me, filling in for Captain Dave today. Let's start things off with cut number 3.
1, and he drives it to deep left center field. Brenlin's not going to get there. Yes, he is. He makes a leaping catch at the wall, and he throws it in. 1 run will score, tagging at third. Oh, Austin Brenlin saves a grand slam. He gets a hat tip from Garrett Gainey. Brenlin ran to the wall in left center and leaped and made the catch. Missouri makes it 4-1, but the Gamecocks will take that trade out.
It can't be understated how huge that moment was for South Carolina baseball yesterday. Austin Brenling robbing a grand slam from Missouri in a game that at that point in time was 3-1. Now, as you heard there from Derek Scott, Missouri was still able to tag up and bring in an additional run across the plate, which made it 4-1 at that point in time. But if that one goes over, it's a 71 game. And South Carolina, who was fortunately able to claw back and win the game, is fighting a much different battle, down 6 as opposed to down 3 for the rest of that game. So it's a huge moment. Preston and I were watching SportsCenter a little bit earlier. It made it into number 2 on the top 10 countdown of best plays from yesterday, and obviously well-deserved there for Austin Brenling. That again was very much a catalyst for South Carolina being able to put together that run in the last couple of innings when the bats finally woke up there in the 7th inning to be able to walk away with that 9-4 victory over Missouri. But that bottom of the top of the second, the bottom of the second, where Brenling is able to nab that grand slam from going over the fence, a huge, huge moment that, I think goes a long way in what the rest of the season could be for South Carolina ultimately. Because when you look at it, they were facing potentially dropping 2 of 3 on the road at Missouri. And look, Columbia, Missouri has not been an easy place for South Carolina. Historically, have not won there since I think Jen brought up 2013. So over a decade was the last time that they won on the road there. So it's a place that's not treated them well. And that's a Missouri team that's not very good. But when you go on the road, and Jamie Bradford was talking about this to Preston and I earlier, you go on the road, it's a place you don't play well at. You're playing on a turf field, which isn't the norm for most places that you play, in a bizarre stadium that's positioned on a hill and that affects the wind and all that kind of stuff. There are a lot of things playing against the Gamecocks. And after losing on Saturday and playing a rubber match on Sunday, finding yourself down by 3 runs for a good majority of that game, I think we were all probably having the same collective thought of like, oh no. You had this great win a weekend ago against Kentucky. You'd won 2 out of your past 3 series, including a big win on the road at Florida, a place that you historically hadn't played well at in recent years either. And now you're going to go and drop a series on the road at Missouri. And what does that do to your national seeding and all that kind of stuff? And I brought up this point a couple of weeks ago when you lost to Arkansas. That was kind of your mulligan, because that didn't really drop you as far as the seeding goes, because Arkansas was, at that point in time, number 2 team in the country. You beat Kentucky. You help yourself a little bit out there. And if you lose to Missouri, that almost kind of undoes what you were able to do against a top 5 Kentucky team a week ago. Fortunately for South Carolina, they're able to hold on, mount the comeback in those last couple of innings, and end up walking out of Como with the series victory, and now have so much momentum. 3 out of the last 4 series victories. Winning a tough road series as you get set. Now you do have Winthrop coming up tomorrow night in your final midweek game of the season, but pushing that to the side, you have a monster series this upcoming weekend, welcoming in Georgia and perhaps the best player in the nation in Charlie Condon to Founders Park. And again, momentum on your side, sitting in a good spot right now. Opportunity to still be over 500 in SEC play if you can handle business over these next couple weeks, and at the very least, split between Georgia and Tennessee, and hopefully put yourself in a good position heading in to the SEC tournament coming up here in just under a month's time, and then positioning yourself to hopefully host a regional once again and see where the postseason can take you in 2024. But it can't be understated. And winning on the road in the SEC is hard in general anyway. but being able to go on the road to a place that you haven't played well at historically and walk away with series victory, no matter how good or bad that opposing team is on the other side, counts for a lot. And hat tip to South Carolina and Mark Kingston and this entire team for going out there and getting that done. And we'll see how they fare this weekend taking on Georgia at home. We'll talk more about this series. He was out there, took the long flight out to St. Louis, the St. Louis area and Columbia. Jack Beltry from Gamecock Central going to be joining me as he does each and every Monday to talk about this series and give his thoughts on what he saw out there in Columbia, the other Columbia, that is. Coming up next, it is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back into the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you on this Monday morning, recapping a interesting baseball series this past weekend on the road out there in the other Columbia in Missouri. As always, our guy Jack Felcher from Gamecock Central out there covering it. Jack, appreciate your time as always. I do have to ask, with the last-minute rain delay towards the end of the game yesterday, were you able to catch your flight, or are you having to hitchhike halfway across the country to get home?
So, first off, thank you for having me on as always. But so what I did was I looked up flights for Sunday night, thinking, okay, maybe there's a chance I can make it back. And I did this about a week or two ago. But I think the latest flight out of St. Louis, because that's where I was flying out of, because Como was insanely expensive, was maybe like 5 o'clock. And I knew I was going to make that anyway. So even with the rain delay, I mean, that just happened. But I decided to book a flight for Monday afternoon. Yeah, I'll be once I'm done with you here, I will be packing up and hitting the road 2 hours to St. Louis and flying out this afternoon.
Well, as goofy as I think turf fields are, especially at the college level, that at least kept the rain delay at a pretty short minimum last night. It could have been a whole lot worse.
Yeah, no, it definitely really could have been a lot worse. And it came in a weird spot because South Carolina had 2 outs in the 8th inning, and unfortunately, Connor McCurry had to exit the game and couldn't come back out there to pitch. So, but hey, either way, South Carolina got the job done and got a big series win this weekend.
Now, if I would have told you going into the weekend that the collection of Roman Kimball, Eli Jones, and Dylan Eskew would combine for I think right at 5 total innings of work, none of them would make it more than 3 on the entire weekend, would you have believed South Carolina would have walked out of Como with the series victory?
Probably not. The bullpen really did save the entire weekend for South Carolina. Let's give them the credit where it's due. And then offensively, the bats did more than enough to at least win 2 games this weekend. And look, I mean, the starting pitching is definitely now it's a question mark in my opinion. Who knows? I would expect Mark Kingston to maybe make some change to the rotation for this upcoming weekend against Georgia. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe he'll stick with the same plan and just expect better results. I do think Dylan Eskew is more than capable of pitching better than he did yesterday. Again, the issue with him has always been walks, and he shredded 4 walks yesterday, no strikeouts. And, look, I mean, he looks like the same pitcher he had been in that first inning, only needing 9 pitches to get through that lineup and retire the side in order, and then just the second inning completely unraveled. So, and it's the same thing with guys like Eli Jones and Kimball and stuff. All of them kind of just fell behind in the count and had to make pitches in the zone, and unfortunately they couldn't do that consistently, and that's kind of why you saw them not pitch very long.
So if you were going to make changes for this upcoming weekend, I mean, what options would be on the table? We've seen South Carolina kind of rotate through a ton of other, scenarios this season, with the exception of Eli Jones, being in the weekend rotation the entire time. I mean, what have they not tried so far? What could they possibly revert back to this weekend against Georgia?
I don't know, and this is me just spitballing off the top of my head with this. I mean, Kingston could lead the rotation the way it is. I'm not saying that it's going to happen one thing or the other, but that's just my thought process. If I were in that position, I would go back to starting Eli Jones on Fridays. He just looked a lot more comfortable in that role, and I mean, look, Kingston has said it doesn't make a difference whether he pitches on Friday or Saturday. He's still the same type of pitcher. I just think there's something about pitching on Fridays that's different. And in this case, it would be Thursday. So maybe that does change things. I don't know. Maybe you do leave Jones on Friday this week, but we'll have to see. And then I would start Ty Good. I don't know. I mean, you could start Roman Kimball. Who knows? But I don't know. And then Sunday, or I guess the game 3 spot, I don't know. I think you just go back to Eskew. So I guess long story short, I would probably end up going Ty Good, Eli Jones, and then Eskew. I just think Roman Kimball I don't know. He doesn't give you a ton of length right now, and I think let's have Ty Good start the game, do what he's been doing, and then, turn the ball over to Kimball. I think a flip-flop of that might work better. Who knows?
You mentioned being comfortable. There's nobody more comfortable right now than Cole Messina. A phenomenal weekend at the plate. Ends up going 7 for 11 overall, hitting a couple of home runs and 7 RBIs to boot. I mean, coming into the season as a preseason All-American, we knew that he was going to be such a catalyst for this offense, and he's playing his best baseball right now as we're getting close to the end of the regular season and approaching the postseason.
He was nuts this weekend. He was on another level this weekend. I mean, after the game, Blake Jackson was screaming in his ear about how he's going to be SEC Player of the Week and stuff, and I'd have to agree with him. He had a tremendous weekend, and honestly a tremendous week in general. I mean, he was playing great in that midweek game as well. So, it's just he's seeing the ball extremely well right now, and he's also playing very well defensively, and he's doing all the little things right. I mean, he had a few doubles this weekend. I think he had a triple. He had a pair of stolen bases. I think he threw a few runners out. And he had a pair of home runs. So, I mean, I think this offense really does go as far as your All-Americans go. And with him and Ethan Petrie swinging it the way they are right now, I think it makes a big difference in what this offense is able to do.
Perhaps the biggest play of the entire weekend, I played the clip a little bit earlier, was what Austin Brindling was able to do at the bottom of the second yesterday, robbing that grand slam and keeping it from being a 7-1 game early on there in game number 3 of the series. Wasn't the weekend he wanted at the plate necessarily, went 1 for 12, did have a couple of RBIs, but man, we look at his body of work as a whole over these past couple weeks since being inserted in the starting lineup. Austin Brindling has been nothing short of phenomenal in his limited amount of work so far this year.
Yeah, he's really done his job since he's gotten his chance to start. And look, that play yesterday, it really did make an entire difference in that game. You're talking about a 3-run difference right there. I mean, it could have been a 7-1 game had that grand slam gone in Missouri's favor. And even everyone knew how important that play was in that moment. I mean, Ethan Petrie was saying after the game that he told Brindling that play saved the game, and even the guy who, I think it was Missouri's first baseman, had told Petrie that play saved the game as well. So my point is that, look, I mean, that play right there, it was unbelievable. There's a reason why I checked in at number 2 on SportsCenter's top 10, but he even despite his struggles at the plate, look, I mean, 1 for 12 is not exactly ideal for him hitting leadoff and stuff. But the fact that he was able to make up for it with his defensive heroics right there, I think that just goes to show why he's still going to be in this lineup moving forward.
And talking to Jack Velcher from Gamecock Central, this Missouri team, they're not good. They're fighting for their lives to try and get to the SEC tournament here in a couple weeks. So South Carolina beating them shouldn't come as a surprise, but going on the road to Como is never easy, and being able to claw back, especially the way they did yesterday, putting together the offense they did over the last couple of innings, what does a victory or winning a series like this past weekend say about this team? And was it due for momentum going into an enormous test this upcoming weekend against Georgia?
Well, I think if they, with how Sunday's game went, either way, it would have been a huge difference maker in this entire season. Because if they lost yesterday, we're talking about, oh my gosh, what is going on with the South Carolina team? That could have been the worst loss of the year for them. Had they, obviously they did win the game, and the fact that they did win just goes to show that this team is more than capable of going into a tough environment and winning a big series. And it does keep their potential national seed, hosting a super regional type of hopes alive. And I think this team is really clicking at the right time. They're having fun. I mean, they're, just the vibes in that dugout after that win yesterday were immaculate, and they were having a good time and stuff. So I think it really does bode well, and it gets you ready for what's to come this week. They know how good Georgia can be, and, it's going to be a huge series. But the fact that it's at Founders Park, I think will give South Carolina enough juice to get through the weekend with maybe another series win here.
Well, we'll hit you up later on in the week, as it is going to be a very, very big contest. 3 games coming up at Founders Park, running Thursday through Saturday. And we know South Carolina is going to have to deal with Charlie Connon, who, last check, on a 7-game home run streak, by the way, coming into this weekend.
Oh, my gosh, that guy. Every time I go on Twitter, I always see a home run off that guy's bat. He is – look, the Cleveland Guardians, they're going to be getting a good one later this summer in the MLB draft. So that's a very good player right there, and South Carolina's going to have to find a way to stop him. If I were them, I'd maybe just intentionally walk him every time, but at some point you got to pitch to him, and let's see what happens this weekend.
We'll check in with you later in the week looking ahead to that series. Appreciate it as always, Jack.
I appreciate it, my man. Thank you so much.
Again, Jack Feltry from Gamecock Central. We'll hand out some accolades from this past weekend series against Missouri. Coming up next as the Extra Point rolls along, Tyler Head along with you on your Monday here on The Game. It is a busy time on the sports calendar with baseball, basketball, hockey, all that stuff going on. It's also a very, very busy time for our friends over at Twin Peaks. Coming up on Sunday, it is, in fact, Mother's Day. And cool moms, well, they love the Twin Peaks Lodge. Show your appreciation this Mother's Day by treating your mom to specials on some of their favorites all day long, including mimosas, sangrias, and much, much more. Sunday also starts the Miss Twin Peaks, Miss Popular voting, which runs through June the 11th. Countdown is on for Miss Twin Peaks 2024, and voting Miss Popular is officially live. Head over to MissTwinPeaks2024.com to learn about the contest and cast your 5 votes for your favorite Twin Peaks girl. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you here on this Monday. Reminder, as always, you can watch us on the Game TV, sponsored by our friends over at Shepherd's Glass and powered by the folks over at Integrated Media. As also, you can check us out on the 1075 The Game app. Check out the App Store or the Google Play Store. Give us a download and listen to us wherever you go. It is indeed time to talk some hardwood with the Gamecock baseball team, sponsored by our friends over at Georgia Pacific. A lot of accolades to hand out from this weekend on what was a very, very important series victory for the Gamecocks. Myself and Jack Felcher just talked about it a few minutes ago. Cole Messina walks away from the weekend 7 of 11 with 7 RBIs and 2 home runs, one coming on Friday and one coming on Sunday's game to wrap up the series. And it can't be understated how important he is to this offense. He's been slid around in many different spots. Lead off, he's obviously batting cleanup now. And when Cole Messina's on, usually the rest of the team's going to follow in line behind that. That was certainly the case this past weekend, and you're going to need him to stay red hot as you go through these next couple weekends because, again, you got Georgia and you got Tennessee, 2 of the best programs in the SEC to close out your regular season, not to mention what you have in Hoover, and then whatever you end up doing as far as the regionals go and whatever you can do past that. And Cole Messina is going to be such a big part of South Carolina's success going forward over these next couple of weeks, hopefully couple of months, as South Carolina can hopefully make a deep run in the NCAA tournament and get themselves back to Omaha. Offensively as well, Ethan Petrie, I mean, what can you say? 3 of 9, 3 RBIs, and 2 home runs on the weekend, similar to Cole Messina, 1 home run on Friday and 1 home run on Sunday as well. So just a very, very efficient weekend for Ethan Petrie, up there at the plate, taking advantage of what he can and driving in a fair amount of runs, which all were very helpful for South Carolina. Thought we might get a little bit of a scuffle there with Ethan Petrie when he got hit one of the times yesterday and gave that look, right? Gave the pitcher that little 2-second stare while coming out of the box that something might end up going down. And look, if you've ever been hit by a fastball, especially one that's, in the 90s, you're not going to be too happy about it by any means. So I can understand why he was frustrated. I don't think that was intentionally done by Missouri's pitcher. They are a team that's hit more batters than anybody in the SEC this year, so that's kind of on brand for them. And thankfully, things did not come to blows because Ethan Petrie, the last thing you want to see is him having to serve some kind of suspension or something like that for getting into some kind of scuffle. So Ethan Petrie, good on the weekend, up there at the plate, and again, thankfully he was able to keep his emotions in check, and we don't have to worry about not playing without him at any point going forward. Pitching as you can't give it to the starting pitching because again, Kimball went 1 inning, Jones went 2 2/3 innings, and then Eskew went 1 1/3 inning on Sunday. The bullpen, so huge this weekend, and I feel like I could give this, nod to the bullpen as a whole, but I really got to go with Garrett Gainey because he was asked to step in twice over the course of the weekend. He came in after Ty Good had a very good session of long relief following Roman Kimball on Friday night. Gainey on Friday night comes in 2 1/3, 1 hit, 0 runs, 0 walks, 5 strikeouts, and then comes in on Sunday after Dylan Eskew, again, can't go more than an inning and a third and can't stop walking batters. Gainey comes in on Sunday, 3 2/3, 1 hit, 0 runs, 0 walks, 5 strikeouts. Again, 10 strikeouts for the entire weekend over the course of right at 6 innings of pitching with 2 hits allowed. Again, no runs and no walks. Extremely efficient work for Garrett Gainey over the course of his 2 appearances this past weekend. And he's got a guy that seems to have his confidence back. We talked about him so much at the beginning of the season playing in non-conference where he was just lights out. I mean, this dude was not giving up runs to anybody outside of that one home run against Clemson in that extra innings game. But even then, it's like, man, that's the only run he's given up. This dude is on fire. He's out there doing his, machine gun and kicking down doors and all that kind of stuff. Like, confidence was high. Then you get into conference play and he starts to struggle. And he's a guy, again, with his reactions and stuff like that, wears his emotions on his sleeve, and that's okay. But pitchers are head cases, right? And when things aren't going right, it's hard to get them back on track. And he's had his ups and downs so far this season. But, man, I really hope, and again, Missouri's not a great team. I really hope, if nothing else, the momentum from this weekend can carry over for Garrett Gainey over the course of these next couple series and into the postseason, because he's going to be vitally important for this bullpen, especially if he can pitch the way that he did this past weekend against Missouri. Let's hear a little bit from Coach Kingston on this team as a whole and their resilience to make it through this weekend, even when the odds were a little bit against them. Cut number 6 here, Ed.
Yeah, look, this team has a lot of heart. This team has a lot of fight. There's no doubt about it. And I think today was just another example of that. It looked a little bleak there late. It was 4-1 going to the 7th inning, and we couldn't generate anything. And once we got it going, we couldn't be stopped. It was a lot of fun to watch. Our bullpen came in and was just dominant, and we finally got our offense going again. It was just a very, very big win for us.
Appreciate Dua Lipa in the background there. That was an on-the-field interview, so that's why you had a lot of background audio going on there. But I think Kingston brings up a really good point. This team is resilient. You can never count out South Carolina baseball because they can jump on you quick, whether that be at the beginning of the game and put you in a hole or put together 3 great innings like they did at the end of yesterday's game to overcome a deficit and end up pulling away. And that's why the Brindling thing was so huge and so important, because you're managing the game a whole lot differently down 4-1 as opposed to being down 7-1. And with that minimal deficit that South Carolina had going into the 7th inning there on Sunday, it was a lot more, it was not insurmountable. You had Dalton Reeves with a solo home run, then Petrie tied things up with his 200 homer, and everything past that was gravy. Cassis getting an RBI, Brindling driving in a runner, and then, of course, you have the Messina homer to start off things in the 9th inning where Carolina, which, again, going back to the bullpen, they'd already stifled Missouri at that point in time at the plate, where you really thought, or I think you really had confidence that once South Carolina got out to any kind of lead yesterday, they were probably going to be able to hold on to it the way that bullpen was pitching. That certainly ended up being the case, which was good for the Gamecocks, being able to walk out of there with the series victory. And again, a place that you've struggled at historically, which, hey, that's 2 notches on your belt this year in Missouri and Florida, and 2 places that, again, historically you have not done well on the road at. And walking out of there with series victories, huge for momentum. Again, you got a daunting task with Georgia later on this week, and trust me, we'll preview that matchup plenty. I'll get some of my former colleagues that are in the booth for Georgia baseball to discuss things later on in the week and give us an in-depth thought into this team for what's a huge series. But man, carrying this momentum off of this series victory and winning 3 out of the last 4 going to be very huge for taking on a tough opponent in Georgia this upcoming weekend. Our short week, by the way, Thursday through Friday series coming up at Founders Park, taking on one of the best teams in the country and legitimately the best player in the entire country in Charlie Condon. So again, we'll preview that matchup more as the week goes along. We'll wrap up hour number 1. 3 guarantees in life, it seems. Death, taxes, and Rush Probst getting himself into trouble. We will talk about that coming up. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday morning here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyrod with you here on this Monday morning. Reminder, once again, the craft beer card is back. Head online to 1075thegame.com. Click on the Sweet Deals tab. Purchase yourself a craft beer card, $30 value that you can spend $30 at 12 different craft beer locations. A $360 value, all yours for just $79. Again, 1075thegame.com and the Sweet Deals tab for the craft beer card. How much value do you place on winning? Probably a lot. How much value do you place on winning at the high school level? Maybe that's a little bit of a different question. If you're not familiar with Russ Probst, perhaps he's the most infamous high school football coach currently in America as of right now. This guy has brought controversy wherever he's gone, but he's also won just about everywhere that he's gone. And if you're not familiar with him, maybe this will ring a bell. The show Two-A-Days back on MTV in the mid-2000s that focused on Hoover High School, a powerful high school football program in the state of Alabama at that point in time, coached by Russ Probst. Russ Probst won 5 Alabama state high school football championships, all those within a 6-year span from 2000 to 2005. All those coming at Hoover High School after leaving Hoover High School, and by the way, he was ousted at Hoover High School because he had a second secret family on the side that he kept under wraps for years and years and years. After he left there, ends up coming to Georgia, Colquitt County High School, coaches there for 10 years, wins a couple state championships there as well. And I remember from being in the state of Georgia, he was routinely in the state championship game, or at least very deep in the GHSA playoffs when he was with Colquitt County. Got ousted there for other things that happened. This guy has a laundry list of issues wherever he goes. And this past week, he officially resigned from Pell City High School in Alabama, where he was the head coach for this past year. Now, the specific reasons for why he decided to step down were not made public. There was a vote a couple of weeks ago at a school board meeting to try and oust him then. He survived that vote, but ultimately decided to step down the other day. Said, according to Alabama.com, it's become a distraction here, he said. It's not good for our kids. I feel like it's the right thing to do. I'm always going to stand by my players and do the right thing for my players. And at this time, I feel this is the right time. Now, again, we don't know all the details of why this is happening in Pell City, Alabama, but I imagine it's probably for something controversial like what's happened in every other stop he's had along the way, whether it be for the secret family, whether it be giving his players drugs, whether it be for headbutting players and having to be suspended for an entire season because of that. I believe he's also mismanaged school funds at a place that he's gone to before. Like, this guy just has a moral compass that doesn't exist, but he wins. And at the end of the day, winning matters more than anything else in a lot of people's eyes. What does Vince Lombardi classically say? Winning's not everything. It's the only thing. And he's now stepped away from Pell City High School. We're at May the 6th. So if he's announced as the head coach for some other school, whether it be in Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, or whatever it may be, in a month's time, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm shocked. It's unfortunate that because of his success as a head coach, he just continues to get chance after chance after chance. And every place says the same thing whenever they hire the guy. Oh, we think he's changed his ways. We think he's going to bring the right culture, the right fit to insert football program name here. And nothing works. Nothing ever changes. He's still the same guy, the same morally bad person that he's always been, but he wins and he gets results. And at the end of the day, that's what everybody cares about. And he's going to get another chance somewhere because he wins. And he's going to run into some other bit of controversy, some other issue at whatever that school is that's going to get him fired or make him resign or whatever it may be in a couple years' time, because it's just a never-ending cycle with Russ Probst. And I don't have the time to delve in to everything bad that he's done and all the details of his personal life and all that kind of stuff. If you have time today, I recommend it. There's a couple of good stories. One's on ESPN. I think The Athletic also had one a year or two ago that really go deep into who Rush Probst is as a person and all the controversy that he's created on the field. So if you have time today or in the next couple of days, I would recommend reading that if you're not up to speed on who exactly Rush Probst is. But a lot of us do know him. Again, most infamous high school coach in America, who is once again, not this time being forced out, deciding to step away, likely before being forced out at Pell City High School in Alabama. And again, the clock is ticking, in my opinion, before he ends up getting hired somewhere else that thinks he's changed his ways and can be a better person and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. Regardless, he gives us plenty to talk about. He's very entertaining to the degree of a content standpoint. And again, somebody's going to give him another chance, and he'll probably end up creating more controversy there as well. That'll do it for hour number one. And again, we'll get back into the baseball discussion, as well as Jamari Thomas committing to South Carolina basketball as well. But coming up the next hour, I wasn't here on Friday for the latest in the ongoing saga of the future of college football and the new model of potentially paying players. I'll dive into that coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points Hounded with you on your Monday morning. One more hour to go flying solo. Coming up at 10:30, by the way. Going to be talking to Midwinter. If you are on the Twitter space and follow anything with NIL, you've probably seen Midwinter's name pop up. He is a sports law attorney out of Kansas City that has been on top of everything going on with NIL and all these shifts going on in the world of college sports. And he'll be joining me at 10:30 to give the insight on the latest things that have gone down and the new developments that are on the horizon in regards to that. I wasn't here on Friday, and I'm sure Jay and Elijah and Terry and everybody talked ad nauseum about the latest news that came out on Thursday. I'm not going to go over all the details because you probably heard them already, but this new future model of college football, the one with the cap in the neighborhood of $20 to $22 million, where it would be a $300 million investment over a 10-year span for individual schools and programs that would include that cap, that would also include, paying into this, back pay of this court case of House versus NCAA that the NCAA is going to lose, where they're going to have to pay back all these athletes for all the money that they theoretically could have made if NIL would have been a thing for the past 100 or so years, in addition to a couple of other things as well. So, again, I'm sure you've all heard the details of what this is going to be. The one thing that sticks out to me about this, though, is the deadline of deciding on this coming within the next 40 days. Now, we've talked about the future of college football. We've talked about all these models, and the Power Five is going to break away. It's doing its own thing, and we're going to have players that are going to be employees and unions and all that kind of stuff. And we talk about it so much with this relative sense of, oh, it's coming somewhere down the road, somewhere in the future. Now you have a definitive timeline being put on this, where the decisions on this are being made within the next 40 days. Before we get to July 4th, the halfway point of the summer, we're going to know the future of college football. And it could be implemented as soon as potentially 2025. So this could be the last season of the student athlete in college football and all college sports for that matter. And that is such a, I don't know if bewildering is the right word to think about it, but like a crazy thing to think about. We've seen so much change over the course of college sports across the board, specifically in college football, in the past 5 years. This is going to be the biggest seismic shift out of all of them because this completely changes the structure of what we know college sports to be. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I've been on the side of players getting paid and players being able to benefit off their name, image, and likeness since the very beginning, before NIL was ever a thing. I've always wanted that to happen. But I don't know if I ever foresaw it coming to this. But now we're on the doorstep. The powers that be have decisions to make on how this model is going to work and what it's going to look like. And it's coming. Even, if it doesn't get voted on or approved at this juncture, doesn't mean it's not coming down the road. Just may need a little more fine-tuning, a few more details being worked out before it's ultimately implemented. It's coming, whether you like it or not. And look, I know a lot of people that are very old school, traditional college football fans that despise this kind of model being a part of the sport, despise the fact that players are soon to become employees, don't like the fact that players are getting paid in general. And again, I'm not on that side, but if you want to think that is fine. That is your opinion. That is your right to have that opinion. But there's no going back. There's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube. As soon as NIL went live in 2021, we were on the fast track to players becoming some form of employee for playing college athletics. And again, now we're on the doorstep. And that decision is coming very, very soon. It begs the question, though, because, again, You're going to have a salary cap, so to speak. So you can't just say, all right, well, we're Ohio State. We have $100 million to spend on our student athletes. We're going to do that. No, there is policing to some degree, and it is a salary cap rumored to be at most $22 million. And it begs the question, how many schools around the country could afford this? Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports has been on top of this thing from the very beginning. Cut number 9 here, Ed. Talking on the Yahoo Sports podcast with Pat Ford and Dan Wetzel over the weekend on the information he's gathered on how many schools could afford to be at the tippy top when it comes to this new college sports model.
Now, how many places can hit the cap? I was talking to a coach last night here in Phoenix. I had a number in my head of how many programs could afford to pay, upwards of $20-25 million. The number I had in my head was vastly different than the one that he said.
What was yours?
Mine was 15 to 20 schools.
15 to 20. Okay. Could Pat and I can play like that Price is Right game. High or low?
And his was nowhere
higher.
Nowhere really near my number.
I say much
higher. Okay.
I'd say double. I'd say 30 to 40.
Yeah, easy. They'll
there
find
you go.
money.
It's exactly what it was. It was 35 to 40. Yeah.
And
I think
10
he was
more
thinking.
will find the way.
Yeah. I think y'all are right. When I think about it, because of the recruiting and the highly competitive nature of all that, as one AD here in Phoenix said to me, we can find the money. We can find the money some way.
A lot of decisions to be made here very, very soon. The collective whole of college football has to decide what the future is going to be. And again, I'm assuming it's going to get approved. And then individual programs have to decide where are they going to be in the pecking order. Because assuming this model that's being thrown out there is what's going to come to fruition, the amount of money that you have at your disposal to pay your student athletes, which at that point in time, I don't think they're going to be called student athletes anymore, will determine how good of a program you are. Now, again, there's a cap. So Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State aren't going to be spending $30 million than South Carolina or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to spend all that money, you can, up to a point. But not everybody can spend up to that point. As Ross Dellinger said, he was being very conservative in his estimate of 15 to 20 teams that he think could hit that mark, where this unnamed athletic director thought there was a whole lot more. Regardless, it's not going to be everyone. And it's not going to be everyone in the Power 5 either. And sure, most Power 5 programs can spend into the, 8 figures, low 10,000, something around the low 10 million, somewhere around there, 15 million or whatever it may be. But even being a couple $1 million short of other programs is going to put you far behind the 8 ball. And here's the thing. High caliber talent likely is not going to settle for making less than what they think they're worth. So 5 stars, guess what? They're going to go to the schools that have that cap. They're hitting that cap, that have all the money at their disposal to pay their athletes. 5 stars aren't going to go to a place that has $12 million to spend, assuming the pay is fair across the board, because you know what? You're cutting their earning potential in half. Which, by the way, there's no telling. This is probably going to end up leading to some kind of other, antitrust lawsuit, because everything that happens ends up leading there. So again, a lot of red tape to kind of figure out, and a lot of details to iron out on what exactly this is going to be. But it does create, in a way, this kind of tier separation, which is something I brought up before where I think it's easy to assume that, if the Power 5 went off and did its own thing, that, suddenly everybody's on an even playing field. They're not. College sports, specifically college football, has never been on an even playing field across the board, and it's not going to start with this thing, because you're going to have programs that have the resources, have the allotment to routinely hit that $22 million mark or whatever that mark is on an annual basis. And then other schools are going to really push all their chips in the table and strain themselves to hit that mark, though it may not be sustainable every single year, to try and compete. Then you're going to have teams that are and programs that are just going to say, you know what, can't compete with that. We're going to cap ourselves at $15 million, and that's the best we can do. Take it or leave it. And, you know, while their financial situation may suggest that's the best idea, from an on-the-field standpoint, guess what? You're not getting that high-caliber talent anymore. Maybe you'll be able to get transfers that are, you know, went to one of those high-caliber places, didn't play as 5-star as a freshman, and just want to go somewhere else to get on the field a little bit more. Maybe you'll get some of those guys. But the majority of the 4- and 5-star talent, guess what? It's going to start going to these places that they know can afford to pay them as much as possible. And this doesn't mean NIL is going to go away, by the way. So just because you're a student athlete that's now deemed an employee of the university, or however it's going to end up being phrased, you can still earn endorsement money and things like that on the side. So that, you know, doesn't mean everybody on the football team is going to be making the same amount of dough. In fact, you know, I think that kind of reverts back NIL to what its perhaps intended purpose was going to be from the get-go, where it's like, hey, here's your opportunity to come in as a student athlete, you know, work deals with local businesses, car dealerships, whatever it may be, and get a little bit extra dough in your pocket. And instead of kind of evolving into what it has, where you're having to go out and say, hey, we know you're a big fan of the program, give us $20 a month so, you know, we can continue to bring in high-end talent. And I'm not saying teams are wrong for doing that, because it's what everybody has to do. It's the nature of the beast right now. That is how you have to raise money and pay your athletes, and that's what they're doing. That's what Garnet Trust is doing here for South Carolina. They're saying, this is how the model works. We need people to subscribe to it. We need people to donate, all that kind of stuff to make sure we're getting in high-caliber talent. And they're doing their best job right now. And Carolina's brought in really good talent here as of late. How that all changes with the new model, none of us fully know. And there's going to be unintended consequences, as I talk about all the time. Things you did not expect to happen that are going to happen. That's the unfortunate nature of these massive rule changes. Things are going to come on the rise that we never foresaw and never even thought about. I have to cross those bridges when we get there. Now, how are teams going to save money? Where do you trim things down a little bit if you are trying to figure out how to allocate those funds, or how to get yourself to that specific point of payments or of funds to pay your athletes top dollar? Well, one area might affect the one position in the Athletics Association that's making more than anybody else. We'll talk about that coming up. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday here on the game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head with you here on this Monday. Again, going to be talking to Midwinter sports law attorney coming up at 10:30. Get his insights from a legal perspective on everything going on with the changes across college sports with this potential model on the horizon that could be implemented as soon as 2025. So again, it's something that you can't ignore because it's going to be here seemingly before you know it. And regardless of if it comes, next fall or maybe the year after, it's definitely going to happen to some degree. We just got to figure out all the fine details of what exactly that's going to look like. We talk about this salary cap of potentially $22 million. It's now going to be allocated for your student athletes. And again, that encompasses not just your football team, it's your basketball team, baseball team, all these other sports, because every student athlete, I'm assuming on scholarship, has to make a minimum amount in this model. Well, and look, athletic associations rake in all kinds of money, but that money as of right now is allocated in certain areas. They're not just sitting back, letting it grow or putting it away for a rainy day. Like, no, the money that you bring in as an athletic association goes to certain things. So now these athletic associations have to figure out, okay, how are we going to save the money, or how are we going to reallocate this money to make sure that we have enough to compete the way that we need to compete. See some schools like Texas A&M that have already started cleaning house with some employees that maybe they could do without, which I hate to say it that way because that is people's jobs, that is people's livelihoods that are being taken away from them, by being fired or, being let go, I guess is the way that they'll put it, by a school like Texas A&M. But you reassess things. You trim the fat, so to speak, of, okay, do we really need this job? All right, we don't. Let's get rid of it so we can save ourselves a little bit of money to put into this fund that's going to be paying players down the road. Another area, and I'm not saying coach is going to get fired because of this, but I think coaches' salaries are going to be affected by this quite a bit. So Kirby Smart over the weekend signed a 2-year extension with Georgia through 2033, where he will make $13 million annually, which he is the highest paid active coach in college football, and rightfully so. He's won 2 national championships in the past 3 years. Georgia is kind of the new dynasty of college football and likely will be for a while to come. So he rightfully will get paid a lot for that. I don't know how much bigger coaches' salaries are going to get. Ross Dellinger, again, who we heard from in the last segment there on his article on Yahoo Sports, says in reference to saving money, there are other options, such as reducing coaching salaries, administrative salaries. Salaries and buyouts are responsible for nearly 40% of athletic department budgets in FBS, according to data from the Knight Commission. Another 20% of budgets are related to facility construction, renovation, and debt. So almost half the money of these schools is getting tied up in coaching contracts, and that's not just for your head football coach. That's for your basketball coach, baseball coach, volleyball coach, all that kind of stuff, as well as all those assistants. Think of how many assistant coaches are on a football team and analysts and all that kind of stuff. All that goes into this big budget of paying head coaches. So you talk about trimming fat. That's one area. Maybe your football team doesn't need 30 coaches. Maybe you can do it with 20. You know what I mean? Maybe your head coach doesn't need to make $10 million a year. Maybe he only needs to make 7. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. That's where a lot of this money is probably going to end up being saved. And when it comes to these head coaching contracts, I don't think we're going to see this just enormous jump in deals one after the other. Because, and I always bring this up, when Spurrier was hired here in 2005, that deal was just over $1 million, right? That was huge at the time. Like that, we were just entering the realm of coaches crossing over into that 7-figure threshold. And now it's just gone up and up and up and up and up and up and up. It's kind of been the arms race of college football. And we see coaches leaving high-profile jobs to go to other high-profile jobs because they know how much more they're going to make. I don't know if that's going to be the case anymore. I don't think extensions and raises will be giving out as frivolously because the allocation of resources won't be the same. I'm not saying coaches won't get extensions and won't get raises and all that kind of stuff. It'll still happen, but I think you're going to have to prove even more to make it happen. Because a lot of that money is probably going to go back to the players now. And what does that mean for coaches in terms of level of expectation? Well, to a degree, you can say, well, they're not paying them as much. Perhaps that diminishes what's expected of them. I don't think it does. Because I think especially in what's going to be an even more ultra-competitive environment in this new realm of college football, I think it increases the urgency more and more. Especially if you're not paying your coach as much, which theoretically means you don't have as much of a buyout to worry about if you fire your coach. I think that sense of urgency is only going to get heightened, especially if you're at one of these programs that can afford that salary cap. If you're at the $22 million salary cap and you're paying your coach $6 million, if he's not winning by the end of year 2, guess what? You're out. New guy's coming in. Need somebody that can come in here and win. Now, which programs fall into that category? I don't know. We'll have to see. It's safe to assume the Ohio States, Texas, Southern Cal, Alabama, Georgia, they're all going to be in that upper echelon. And for most of those schools, their coach is going to be set in place for a while because they are successful. But other places, especially if you're in that, right below, as far as competition goes, and you're not quite able to break through that threshold of being a national champion or being in the mix for a national championship, that urgency is going to go up. You're going to have a much shorter leash. So again, a lot of specifics with this to figure out, and it's impossible to sit in here and speculate all the specifics of this because we're still learning. We're still trying to figure out what exactly this is going to be. They're still going to vote on the thing. Too. Don't forget about that. It's not officially official, but it does seem, and if you read enough and pay attention to enough, when certain things get brought up in media, when it comes to these number figures, when it comes to timelines and that kind of stuff, that usually means it's going to happen. So again, the powers that be in college football do have to vote on this very, very soon on deciding what's going to happen. There are some legal proceedings that are going to be hang-ups in the process as well, but there's no hiding from it. The future of college football kind of already is here because we've been dealing with NIL for not even 3 full years now. But this shift of players getting paid by the schools, money that funnels in from the conferences, from TV deals and all that kind of stuff, we're on the doorstep. Buckle up because there's no turning back either. And this isn't going to change my enjoyment for college football, by the way, or any other college sport. I'm still going to watch, and most of you still will as well. There's inevitably going to be that one person that says, well, when this happens, I'm done. You say that until you're sitting around on a fall Saturday and don't have anything to do, and you're dying to flip it over to college football game. And look, I'm not calling you out for that. I'm just saying, we love this sport so much, these college sports so much. I don't think it's going to change what happens on the field, on the court, on the diamond, or whatever it may be. But everything else going on around it, the structure of the sport itself, going to change drastically. And it's going to be interesting to follow and see how everything's affected. Because there are unintended consequences to everything, as I talk about all the time. And I can't sit here and tell you what they're going to be for this new model, but something's going to happen. And we'll see how egregious or how concerning it is when we get there. Get more insight on this. Mitt Winter, again, a college athletics attorney in Kansas City, going to be joining me coming up next. Pick his brain a little bit on all this stuff going on with court cases and NIL and the future of college sports and all that kind of stuff coming up. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you here on this Monday, talking all things about the future of college sports and the new models that could be on the horizon. I want to welcome back in for another session on this show. Talked to him back at the end of January. Mitt Winter, who is a college athletics attorney out of Kansas City, covering all things relating to NIL and sports law. Great follow on Twitter at Winter Sports Law. Stays on top of everything going on in the world of NIL. First of all, Mr. Winter, appreciate your time. Once again this morning, a lot has transpired since last time you and I talked a couple of months ago. I want to start off with this because this House versus NCAA case, which is set to go to court very, very soon, the writing seems to be on the wall that the NCAA is going to lose, and I think the public perception on that has been there for a while. But the NCAA itself seems to be well aware of that, which is why things are starting to move of these potential new models being implemented and these settlements and all that kind of stuff. At what point, in your opinion, do you think the NCAA finally came around to seeing they weren't going to be able to win this case?
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, guys. I think they've, probably for a while now realized that this case was very, very problematic for them. And I think the real issue came for them when the court certified the case as a class action, which made the potential damages in the case estimated somewhere between $4 and $5 billion if they go to trial and lose. And obviously, they'd like to avoid that if possible. So I think they've known that this case has presented a big issue to the current model of college athletics for a while. And settlement talks definitely heated up after that class certification decision. And from reporting last week from ESPN and Yahoo, sounds like those settlement talks are really heating up, and potentially there could be a settlement later this year. So that settlement will lead to a different model than the one we have now, which would include revenue sharing payments from schools to athletes.
So before we dive into that new model, let's say that these settlements weren't worked out. This thing did go to court. NCAA ends up losing. They do have to pay that between $4 and $5 billion to these athletes as a part of this class action lawsuit. I mean, what would be the fallout of that? Would there even be an NCAA at the end of it? Like, what would happen if these settlements weren't on the table?
Yeah, it's a good question. Some people have said that could bankrupt the NCAA if they have to pay that money, but I think they would somehow find the money. The settlement that's being talked about, the money is going to be paid by the NCAA. The damages portion is not going to be between $4 and $5 billion. It's going to be a smaller number than that. It's still going to be a large number, but the conferences and the schools are taking a hit there because the money that they traditionally receive from the NCAA is going to be reduced over a 10-year period to help pay for the damages payments as part of the settlement, at least what's being discussed now. So if they did go to trial and did have to pay that between $4 and $5 billion, they would do something similar. The schools would just be taking a bigger hit over that 10 years.
And talking to Mitt Winter, a college athletics attorney out of Kansas City, on the future of college sports. And I've been talking about, Ross Dellinger's reporting and several others that have been on top of this. These conversations of this new model that could be on the horizon as soon as potentially 2025. So just a little over a year away. Some very important votes coming up here very, very soon. What are the hurdles, and what all goes into completely shifting the model of college sports that we've known for well over 100 years into what is being talked about?
Yeah, so the settlement that's being talked about now really has three components. The first is that damages component that we were discussing, and that's a backwards-looking number. So the claims there are from some current and former college athletes who were not able to monetize their NIL before the rules changed on July 1, 2021. So they're claiming damages for the NIL payments that they would have received in the past if the rules had not prevented them from receiving those payments. And that includes all Division I athletes at Power 5 schools. So that's how that number gets so big. So beyond that damages backwards-looking part of the case, there's two forward-looking parts as well. One that hasn't been discussed as much as some of the revenue-sharing parts is it would eliminate the limits on the number of scholarships that Power 4 schools can give to their athletes. So, right now in sports like baseball and some other ones, you can't give a full scholarship to every athlete on the roster. I think baseball, it's like 11.6 scholarships divided amongst the whole team. So this settlement would get rid of those limits so they could give a full scholarship to every player on the baseball team and other teams right now that aren't allowed full scholarships for the whole roster. So that's another expense that schools will be taking on. And then the part that's been talked about a lot and a big difference from the current model is the revenue sharing component. So that part of the settlement would allow schools to make direct NIL payments to their athletes. And that number that could be paid out per year to all of the school's athletes would be capped under the terms that are being discussed right now. The number that's been talked about is between $17 and $22 million per year for all of the school's athletes, and they're basing that off of the average athletics revenue at the P4 level, and I think it works out to around 20% of that average revenue is how they're landing on that $17 to $22 million figure. So obviously that would be a big change from the current model where schools and conferences, neither of them are allowed to directly share revenue or make NIL payments to their athletes.
So with revenue sharing with athletes, there would have to be some kind of representation for the athletes as a whole, unionizing, or however you may want to phrase it. Now, every state is different when it comes to union rules for state employees at that point in time, because that's what they would be for the respective state universities. What are the hangups there, and are there workarounds with this that could apply specifically only to college athletics?
Yeah, so when we talk about that revenue sharing cap that's being talked about as part of the settlement, it's really replacing the current cap on NIL payments from schools to athletes, which is 0, and moving it to a higher cap. So you're still going to have some antitrust issues there. So there's either two ways to deal with that to make the cap that they want to create immune from antitrust law. The first way is for athletes to be employees, and then they can collectively bargain that cap and other terms of their employment with schools. But as you mentioned, there are some issues with that. Some states don't allow public employees to unionize. So it's possible that some college athletes, if they're employees of their school, would not be able to unionize and collectively bargain. So the other possible way to do it is for Congress to pass a law that says college athletes can engage in what is effectively collective bargaining, but without being employees. And according to reporting this morning, a federal draft bill may be introduced this week that would touch on that and discuss how that might be a possibility. And people are talking about that more as a possibility now, just because the employment issue to get a final decision on whether at least some college athletes are employees and could be employees for the long term, that process is still going to take a while to play out. It has to go through the federal courts, possibly up to the Supreme Court, through the NLRB, all of that process. And it can also change based on who's the president and who they put in place at the NLRB and what different courts say. So people are thinking it may be easier to do something through Congress that would allow what is effectively collective bargaining without the athletes being employees.
Well, Mitt, I certainly appreciate your insight. Again, this is changing by the day and the week, seemingly, and I'm sure this won't be the last time that I hit you up about more of your insights. So certainly appreciate that and looking at things from a legal perspective.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on again.
And that's Mitt Winter, college athletics attorney out of Kansas City. And again, I'm sure we'll hit him up at some point down the line as this continues to evolve and change with the future of college sports always changing and looking ahead to what's on the horizon. We'll come back and wrap up today's edition of The Extra Point. Concession menu prices at two pretty big events across America this weekend. Would you pay this much for food and drink at these events? I'll address that question next here on The Extra Point, here on The Game.
on the far outside. Here comes a run from Stronghold and Resilience has now moved up to take the lead as fierceness is given way, coming by the 16th pole, and Mystic Dan has now come through on the inside. It is Mystic Dan down toward the inside with the lead in the final 16th. Forever Young, Sierra Leone is coming. These three coming down to the wire. Who's it going to be? Oh, it's a photo of the Derby. Oh, it's a photo. Was it Mystic Dan or was it Sierra Leone? Forever Young was between them, catching freedom, finished fourth.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you. That was the call on NBC Sports on Saturday, the 150th running of the Kentucky Derby. Mystic Dan did end up winning that in a photo finish. A fantastic Kentucky Derby on Saturday, and very exciting race itself. The Kentucky Derby as a whole has turned into this event that is for the high class. So when you watch the event on TV, you get red carpet interviews with celebrities and athletes and all this kind of stuff. They're all dressed to the nines. They got on funny outfits and hats and all that kind of stuff. It's really turned in to like the Met Gala, but with horses, I guess is the best way to put it. And with the, high classness of the event comes some pretty high concession prices. And I came across this over the weekend on what the concession stand cost for certain things is at the Kentucky Derby. Let's see here. Have a mint julep for $22. Domestic beers, $13. Let's see here. Wine by the glass, $18. A little bit high and pricey, but again, this is an event, that does cater to the more affluent crowd. So I'm not saying I condone these menu prices, but I get why they're a little high, but certainly not astronomical compared to some other events that were going on around the country, including the Formula One Miami Grand Prix, which was going on yesterday down there in South Beach outside of Hard Rock Stadium. And first of all, congratulations to Lando Norris, first career Grand Prix win, ending the reign of terror. Well, not really ending the reign of terror, but ending the streak of Max Verstappen and his constant winning at the F1 Grand Prix level. A lot of conversation coming away from the weekend, though, was around the menu prices at Hard Rock Stadium and around for the Grand Prix event. This tweet went viral of Hard Rock Bites, which was the concession stand name, and some of the astronomical prices, like for lobster rolls, $280. Let's see, a 1 ounce of caviar, $400. Crispy wing board, $190. Carne asada tacos, $180. Now, I'm assuming these are prices for like a group. So not just to feed one person, to feed a couple of people in one of these little party paddock type of areas at the Grand Prix. But still, insane to be asking that much money for some pretty standard food. I mean, wings, yeah, carne asada is kind of on the nicer end when it comes to meat, but still, $180, that's insane. That's ridiculous. And I'm a big motorsports fan, obviously. F1 in America is so interesting to me because, for one, the racing isn't all that competitive. It's not the entertaining product like we see in NASCAR with photo finishes at Kansas and stuff last night. But you're having a really tough time breaking into that normal, average, working-class fan by making the sport so inaccessible with insanely high ticket prices, insanely high concession stand prices, and all that kind of stuff, like we're seeing this past weekend out of Miami. Same thing happens at COTA, Circuit of the Americas, the Las Vegas Grand Prix that they had for the first time last year. Like, they're still enjoying the surge from Drive to Survive and the Netflix thing and all that kind of stuff. I don't see it being sustainable. I don't think it lasts very long because you just have a tough time appealing to the average person by kind of shutting them out of these type of events. And if you're a big enough fan, you want to go see it when it comes to your home country. And there's 3 chances now between Miami, Austin, and Las Vegas. And it's just getting more and more inaccessible, unfortunately. So if you were going to one of these events over the weekend, especially the F1 Grand Prix, you probably had to take out a second mortgage on your house if you wanted to snack while taking in the event. But just insane for some menu prices there. That'll do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Coming up next, going to jump into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Wes Mitchell and Chris Clark, as always, jumping in here with me. Got a lot to discuss. We'll jump back into baseball and the huge series win that was up there in Columbia. Also dive more into Jamari Thomas and his commitment to South Carolina out of the transfer portal after a very brief commitment to a VCU the other day, but now officially Gamecock has signed his financial aid agreement, as Wes Mitchell just tweeted out a few minutes ago. So we'll dive into all those details as well as what's going on with football, too. All that coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on your Monday here on The Game.